talking about life and copper life. We love our law enforcement officers. Thank God for them every day, and their wives and their children and their husbands and their children and their significant loving partners and people in their life and their families. It really is a family affair.
Yeah, it really is. And, you have the officer that leaves every day or night to go to work, but, the families that send them out there, that's one of the things we say, the families loan them to the communities.
They really do.
And know that they've signed this blank check that can be cashed in at any time. And so, those I heard a group of police wives once saying that the greatest sound to them is the sound of the Velcro of their husband's vest when they're back home and they're taking that body armor.
Yeah.
They know that they're back home and safe. That's always kind of stuck with me because as officers, you don't think about that, right?
No, because it's just your everyday. You're just doing it your everyday part of your life that you do. But to your family members and to your children and your spouse, that's a great sound. That means mama or daddy's home.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. And
home. And safe.
Makes you think they kind of hold their breath while you're gone.
Well, there's no doubt they do that.
Right.
My wife's dad was killed in the line of duty, and when she was 8 years old, and so talking with her, living with her for 32 years has been a great learning experience on that side of the survivorship. But also hearing her talk about looking for her dad to come home, and of course the traumatic part that happened when she was looking for him to come home, and he didn't come home, and then every day she was looking for him to come home. She was very, very close to him.
Mm-hmm.
He called her his little songbird. So there were some issues with the other children and all that, and with his wife, but with her, he was very, very close to her for some reason. He just saw her differently in some light, or that's how she remembers it. You don't ever know really some of the traumatic memories or, the traumatic shock, what happened to all the memories. And it was so important to her to know Dad was coming home.
Yeah.
And what that sound of the door closing or his car door closing meant that he was safe and at home. I think that's something the community at large never thinks about officers' families.
Right.
Is they are, they perform this great service and calling to the community. But there's a wife or a husband, there are children that are at home, maybe even sleeping through the night like you and, like normal non-shift working people do, or day shift working people do. You get to sleep at night while officers are out on duty at night.
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with the worst of the worst, the most wicked, evil people you've ever thought about. You can look in their eyes, and if you don't believe this, if you're watching this today, you don't believe this, I guarantee you this is a real deal. You can look in their eyes and they are really truly manifesting a demonic spirit. These evil people, they're past just doing something rebellious or lawless in a way. They are pure, possessed by demon evil people. And they do things that human minds just can't comprehend. You can't even go there in your mind. You don't even think that way, right? Until you have to deal with the case or deal with that human that does these horrible things. Well, a law enforcement officer has to deal with that every day.
Right.
For 8 to 12 hours a day, depending on their shift, right? They have to deal with that human, that person over and over and over again as they work through their case, maybe even go to court, have to testify or prepare their case that they're preparing, or helping the prosecutor's office make sure the case is where it needs to be. And they have to look or see that person or deal with that person on and off throughout those days and see that evil over and over and over again. They have to see crime scene photos over and over and over again to make sure that they have the evidence and the facts they need to close that case. They have to interview that person maybe multiple times over some years, right, to close that case. They have to deal with that evilness day in and day out. Their family, of course, they try to shield from that and protect. They don't want their children. One of the things that I've dealt with spouses a lot and children sometimes, especially teenage children. Well, Dad never tells us what goes on, or Mom never tells us what's happening on the job. And I think they would just feel better if they could talk about that. And I have to tell them, well, sweetheart, the issue here is they're trying to protect you from that. That's the stuff they're trying to protect your life from. They don't want you to see what they see every day because it is that bad.
Right.
And you may think you want to see a crime scene, or you may think you want to see people that are like that. Let me tell you, you won't want to do that but once, because after you do, you've changed, right? And it speaks so deeply to the character of these men and women that do this job, that their heart is not only to protect, excuse me, I'm trying not to get, you're looking at me, it gets me. Their heart is not only to protect the community, they also love their wife and their children. They don't want them to see that, even if they're the one telling the story.
Well, you said something real interesting right there, which is you only have to see it once and it changes you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the great challenge in what we do as a profession, and for all of our officers out there that are listening, not just in the Midwest region where we're at, but
right,
all over this country. There is no doubt that you start out one way in the profession, and you somewhere in there's a transformation.
Well, you got that honeymoon period,
right? But you hit that transformation, and it does change you. And so that's the question. That's the challenge. How do you keep that from changing who you really are, changing your heart, right? And
right.
It comes back to this question about character, and in the last podcast that we had, episode that we had, that's how we ended it, was talking about this quote: circumstances don't dictate your character,
they reveal it,
right? The circumstances that we're surrounded by don't speak to who we are, what we're about, although many people will try to make it that way.
Right.
The circumstances don't dictate our character, they reveal it, meaning how we respond to the circumstances is what really speaks to our character. What's so important, and I think the power of these discussions in this podcast, is they also provide you the opportunity, right, to refine and develop your character. So I guess
that's good.
With that, that's the good news
right.
in the whole situation, is that even if you feel like you have flawed character or you have made mistakes, you have the opportunity to refine and develop the character within you. I guess my question for you is, whose character? Whose character is it that we are displaying? Is it really our own? Or what is or who is the character that should be revealed?
Well, I think one of our verses we read last time was, guard your heart with all due diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life, right?
Right.
So when we talk about guarding our heart or putting a guard around our heart, law enforcement officers they do secondary work or part-time, what they call part-time, or maybe even during their full-time work, they're part of dignitary protection. By the way, to some of these politicians and people who say don't fund the police and do all this stuff, and yet they're using the police for dignitary protection. I'm sorry, that's a soapbox. That's my own little soapbox, but that kind of irks me and gets me a little bit. They're doing guard work. They're guarding someone, right?
Right.
Every night or every shift, they're guarding the city,
Mm-hmm.
you might say. They're dealing with, during the day, the afternoon, midnight shift, late shift, late tack, they're dealing with guarding the city. They're protecting the city from evil that would encroach upon the innocent or those who are in the city that are just trying to live their life and go about every day and sleep and do what they do. The same principle is true for you as an individual. When the Bible says you have to guard your heart, it means you got to put a sentry around your heart, because even though you start out wanting to do the best and wanting to do high character level things from your heart, if you don't guard your heart can be infected or affected even by what you do on a regular basis. Now, if we're talking about law enforcement, if you're guarding your heart, you're going to hit a place after you get out of the academy and you're on the street for a while, you're going to hit a place where you literally question everything that you said. You joined the police department and went through all the academy. You're going to question everything about yourself and why you're doing what you're doing.